Hi, it's Mr. Bennett, and in this video what we're going to talk about is the nitrogen cycle. Now, hopefully you remember that nitrogen is one of the elements that is essential for life. That we talked about how carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen are the elements that all living things have. So today we're going to focus primarily on nitrogen. So nitrogen is one of the elements, and it's required for living things, as 7 protons, 7 electrons, and in most cases nitrogen is a gas. Some of you may have seen nitrogen before as liquid nitrogen. You can make nitrogen a liquid, but you have to get it really, really, really cold to do that. So why do we need nitrogen? Well, you hopefully remember that there are 4 macromolecules that all living things are made out of: proteins, nucleic acids, carbohydrates, and lipids. Well, nitrogen is used to make 2 of those macromolecules. 2 of those macromolecules that are made by nitrogen are proteins and nucleic acids. Let's talk about proteins first. Proteins are made out of amino acids, and every amino acid has nitrogen in it. Every amino acid. There's over 50 different amino acids. Your body has over 20 amino acids in it, and every last one of those amino acids is going to have a nitrogen in it. So without nitrogen, you can't make amino acids, and without amino acids, you can't make proteins, and without proteins, you can't make living things. Nucleic acids also contain nitrogen in them. Here, hopefully you remember that the parts of a nucleotide is you have a phosphate group, you have a pentose sugar or a 5-carbon sugar, and then attached to that you have one of the nitrogenous bases: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. Now, all of these nitrogenous bases have nitrogen in it. Here you see nitrogen here, 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 and so on. So you can see that nucleotides have a lot of nitrogen in them. So without nitrogen, we could not make proteins, we could not make nucleic acids, and without these 2 very important macromolecules, we can't have living things. So if all living things require nitrogen, the question then comes up, how do living things get nitrogen? Well, the good news is that nitrogen is not hard to find. 78% of the air that you breathe is made out of nitrogen. If you want to touch nitrogen, just do that. The air that you touch is made out of nitrogen. So 78% of the air that we breathe right now is made out of nitrogen. That's the good news. The bad news is you can't use it. You're breathing in nitrogen right now, and you're breathing it right back out. Your body does not have the ability to take nitrogen out of the air and use it. Plants don't have the ability to take nitrogen out of the air and use it. There's only one living thing on the planet that can take nitrogen out of the air and use it, and that's bacteria. Bacteria are single-celled organisms. They're the smallest living things on the planet, and they are the only things that can take nitrogen out of the air. Period. No exception. So how all living things get their nitrogen is traced back to bacteria somehow. The bacteria are able to take nitrogen out of the air, and they're able to use it, and then everything else that's alive uses the nitrogen that bacteria absorbed out of the air. There's a name for this process, and the name for this process is nitrogen fixation, and this is an important term that you should know. Nitrogen fixation describes the process where bacteria that live in the soil take nitrogen out of the air and they convert it into something that's called nitrate. And nitrate is a plant fertilizer that is based on nitrogen. So this is the first step in how living things get their nitrogen. Bacteria absorb it out of the air, and once again, only bacteria can absorb it out of the air. And then bacteria convert the nitrogen that's in the air into a form of fertilizer that plants can then use. And that's going to be the first step in how living things get their nitrogen, and that step is called nitrogen fixation. Now, nitrogen fixation is such an important process, all life depends on it, that we need to slow down and talk about it in some more detail. So let's get some of the details of nitrogen fixation. First thing that happens, the first step in nitrogen fixation, is there are bacteria that live in the soil. And these bacteria that live in the soil have the ability to absorb nitrogen out of the air, okay? And the only place that you find bacteria that can absorb nitrogen out of the air is they live in the soil. So these bacteria that live in the soil, they take and absorb nitrogen gas, they absorb it out of the air, and they use it to make ammonia. You can see it right here. So the nitrogen is absorbed out of the air, these bacteria absorb it, and then they use it to make ammonia. That's one type of bacteria. Now, the next step in the process is a second type of bacteria. This is a different type of bacteria. They absorb the ammonia and they use it to make something called nitrite. Nitrite. So that's step 2. So step 1 is one type of bacteria absorbs nitrogen and makes ammonia. Step 2 is a second type of bacteria absorbs the ammonia and uses it to make nitrite. And then step 3 is another type of bacteria. So we've got 3 different types of bacteria we're talking about here. Absorbs the nitrite and it uses it to make something that's called nitrate. Nitrate. So this is all based on bacteria. Bacteria absorb nitrogen out of the air and use it to make ammonia. Then another type of bacteria uses the ammonia to make nitrite. And then a third type of bacteria uses the nitrite to make nitrate. Well, once we have nitrate, we finally have something that something other than a bacteria can use, specifically plants. Nitrate is plant fertilizer. All fertilizers out there are one of two things. They're either phosphorus or they're nitrate. So nitrate is a plant fertilizer, and plants are able to absorb this nitrate and use it to make nucleic acids and proteins. So this is how plants are able to get their nitrogen, is they absorb this nitrate stuff that was made by bacteria, and then once the plants absorb that nitrate, they're able to use it to make the things that they need nitrogen for, nucleic acids and proteins. Now, some plants are better at this than others. The best plants in the world at doing this are called legumes. Legumes, examples of legumes are going to be like alfalfa, peas, and beans. These are special types of plants that really attract these bacteria that make nitrate. And bacteria that make nitrate we call nitrifying bacteria. So all 3 types of bacteria we just talked about that are used to make nitrate are called nitrifying bacteria. So this is the whole process of nitrogen fixation, of how bacteria take nitrogen in the air and ultimately convert it into nitrate, which is a form of nitrogen that plants can use to grow. So now I've taught you enough that we can go back and we can answer the question of how do plants and animals get the nitrogen that they need. Well, we've already answered the question for plants. Plants get the nitrogen they need by absorbing nitrate from the soil. Some types of plants, if you go ahead and you look at their roots, you'll see these little knobs on their roots, and these knobs are called nodules. And in these nodules, it's going to be packed with these nitrifying bacteria that are taking nitrogen from the air and they're using it to make nitrate for the plant. So plants get all of their nitrogen by absorbing nitrate from the soil and then using that nitrate to get the nitrogen that they need. Animals, on the other hand, we don't do that. Animals, how do we get our nitrogen? We get it by eating something, okay? Animals get the nitrogen they need by either eating a plant and absorbing the nitrogen from the plant, or by eating another animal. Okay, here we got a big old tarantula eating a mouse. This mouse would have eaten some plants and absorbed some nitrogen from the plants, and then the spider's eating the mouse and it's now absorbing some nitrogen from the mouse. So that's how plants and animals get their nitrogen. Plants absorb nitrate from the soil. That's how they get their nitrogen. Animals get their nitrogen by eating either a plant or another animal. Now, nitrogen fixation is the most important way that nitrate gets into the soil where plants can absorb it, but there are other ways that you can get nitrate into the soil. So we talked about this way, about how bacteria take nitrogen, convert it into nitrate, where it can be absorbed by plants. We can see a couple other arrows going on here that show you 2 other ways that we can get nitrate into the soil. The first one is decomposition. We got to talk about decomposition again. When something dies, there's nitrogen in its body. Your body is about 12% nitrogen, okay? When an animal dies or a plant dies, the nitrogen that is in its body is going to be released back into the soil. Now, what's going to happen is bacteria are going to take the nitrogen that are in that living thing and they're going to convert it back into nitrate. That when something dies, its body is broken apart by decomposers. These decomposers release the nitrogen from that living thing into the soil where it's turned into ammonia. And then the process starts all over again. From ammonia, the ammonia is converted into nitrite, and then the nitrite is converted into nitrate, which can then be used by plants. So decomposition is another way you can get nitrate into the soil. As something dies, nitrate is released. In elementary school, you may have heard the story of about how the Native Americans helped the first white people survive in America by showing them that, hey, if you plant a dead fish, your corn will grow better. That's because the dead fish decomposes, releases nitrate, and then that corn absorbs the nitrate in order to grow better. This is another reason why the grass grows really well in a cemetery, because you got lots of dead things there that are decomposing that are giving off nitrate. The other way you can get nitrate into the soil is animal waste. Animal waste. All animal poop and all animal urine contains nitrogen, and this nitrogen can be quickly converted by bacteria back into nitrate. This is why you go and you buy some animal crap to go ahead and stick on your garden. Or this is the reason why farmers spread cow manure all over their fields, because that cow manure is loaded with nitrate, and that nitrate is going to be absorbed by the plants so they can go ahead and they can get the nitrogen they need to grow. So those are the two other ways you can get nitrate into the soil, is from dead things decomposing and also from animal waste. So we've talked about how we get nitrate into the soil. Now we need to talk about how we get nitrate out of the soil. So we talked about how nitrogen fixation, decomposition, and animal waste all work to add nitrate to the soil. Now we need to talk about how we get nitrate back out of the soil. Let me explain why this is important. The step that is going to remove nitrate from the soil is called denitrification. Now, why do we care? Well, I taught you that there's bacteria in the soil that are absorbing nitrogen out of the air and using it to make nitrate. So these nitrifying bacteria are constantly sucking nitrogen out of the air to make nitrate. Well, if you only had bacteria removing nitrogen from the air, eventually what would happen is all the nitrogen would disappear and there'd be no more nitrogen left in the air. That's where denitrification comes into the process. That nitrogen fixation is where bacteria take nitrogen to make nitrate. Denitrification is the complete opposite. Another type of bacteria takes nitrate and uses that nitrate in order to make nitrogen gas. So that's denitrification. These bacteria absorb nitrate and they take energy out of this nitrate, and as they do that, they release nitrogen, which goes back into the air. So we have a nice little cycle going on here. Yes, we have bacteria that are removing nitrogen from the air to make nitrate. We have another type of bacteria that are taking that nitrate, breaking it apart, and adding nitrogen back into the air. So we have a cycle, and we don't run out of nitrogen that's in the air. So denitrification is one way that nitrate can be removed from the air, from the soil. The other one we need to talk about is the other way that you can get nitrate out of the soil is by using water. Remember, water is a universal solvent, and more things will dissolve in water than anything else. Well, nitrate is no exception. Nitrate dissolves in water like nobody's business. It dissolves in water very, very, very easily. So if you have this soil here, and the soil has nitrate in it, if some water either flows over the soil or sinks down through the soil, down to the groundwater, it will absorb any nitrate it comes in contact with and take it with it. So nitrate dissolves in water, and any place the water goes, the nitrate will go with it. That's going to be very important in the next video when we talk about problems with the nitrogen cycle and ways that it can go wrong. So the main things you should know from this video is, what is nitrogen used for? Why do living things need it? How do plants and animals get their nitrogen? What happens in denitrification? What happens in nitrogen fixation? And then how is decomposition in animal waste related to the nitrogen cycle? If you understand those things, you'll be in pretty good shape when it comes to the nitrogen cycle.